The first few episodes of this podcast have been pretty heavy. Early career pressure, responsibility, learning things the hard way. So for this one, I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to talk about a project that was just fun. It wasn't easy, it wasn't clean. A lot of the things we did were not particularly elegant, but fun in the way that it reminds you why this job can be so satisfying when it goes right. This was a project where another company had already tried and failed. The customer was understandably pretty angry. The constraints were pretty extreme: tight spaces, super heavy structure, high accuracy, no room to modify the environment. I said yes to this project for one reason, and that was because it was a really cool project. In this episode, I'm going to tell the story of a massive XYZ gantry system, distributed motion control, and a very unhappy customer that turned around. Welcome to From the Bucket, where controls design meets reality. I'm your host, Keely Smith. In this podcast, we explore industrial control systems as they exist in the field, not just how they were designed in CAD or how they look on paper, but how they operated in a production environment, how operators and maintenance interfaced with them, and the fun and interesting stories that I've made throughout the years of being a controls engineer. So this was an XYZ gantry, basically a big Cartesian robot that can move a sensor left and right, front and back, and up and down over a part. I do feel like I need to establish a little bit of why some of the aspects of this episode are going to be pretty vague. So this system that we were building, this XYZ gantry, is for a defense contractor. The application was very sensitive, what we were actually doing with this. So I will not really be getting too deeply into how the system was being used, more of just how the project worked and some of the different aspects of it that made it a really fun and interesting project. Obviously, that little disclaimer right there kind of makes it more fun and interesting just by itself, but trust me, the project gets more interesting as well. So, with all that out of the way, let's jump into the project itself. The beginning of the project was interesting because it wasn't actually my project at all. I never bid on it, I wasn't involved in the initial concept, I wasn't part of any of the early design conversations. What had happened was another company had started the project, so they were working with the customer on the initial goals, concepts, how the system was supposed to function, and like a lot of projects do when they're kind of early in that process, the scope started to creep, and then it started to creep a little more, and eventually it crept to the point where the system grew outside of what that company was realistically set up to build. So by the time I had gotten involved, the machine we were talking about wasn't small anymore. The standalone structure for the XYZ gantry ended up being close to 1,000 pounds. And I mean, just the stand, just the massive piece of steel before you even put the motion, sensors, or anything else on it. So the company reached out to me for assistance. They knew that we were a little bit better equipped to handle what the system had grown into at this point. So naturally, we had questions. We wanted to start with the basics of, you know, what actually is this project? What is it that we're trying to do? How is it supposed to look? Um, have we ordered any parts? Do we have layouts? Do we have designs? Um, Basically, all of that information that if you're walking into a project like this kind of blind, you want to have. So as we started this process, it kind of became apparent that it's what they were working on wasn't a bad design. There wasn't a design, so we had to come up with everything from the ground up, which unfortunately was a really big sticking point with the customer, because what I had not known at this point was the previous company had been working with this customer for 3 or 4 months to kind of get this project going. And then I came in and I told them that, we need to kind of look at this from the ground up again and figure out what exactly we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. As you can imagine, that conversation did not go over well. What I've kind of beat around the bush with my description here of the other company is that I've worked with this other company many, many times before. They've been a really good partner company slash vendor for me. So I didn't want to just go in there and say, hey, their design's garbage. We just need to start over because they didn't do anything. That would have both landed poorly with the customer as well as a company that I treated as a partner company. I remember sitting on a meeting and the previous company had jumped off the meeting and the customer had asked me to stay on for a minute after. And after they confirmed that everybody else was off the call, they very pointedly just asked me, can you guys actually do this project and get it moving? So I put my best salesman hat on and didn't really answer the question directly, because in my head, I knew that the only real way to answer their question was to show. They had been working with another company that they talked a lot. They said a lot of words. They talked about a lot of different ways that they could do it, but they weren't looking for words at this point, and I knew that. So I knew what I needed to do was actually design something. I needed to get this thing moving and build it. And for me, that meant starting from the very beginning and looking at all of the engineering. All right, so let's break this thing down into small pieces because again, we're just coming into this. So let's figure out what we got to do here to make this successful. So the place that this gantry was going was in an X-ray booth. So there was no new penetrations. We couldn't actually modify this booth at all because there was radiation shielding. So there was no, you don't go and put a hole in an X-ray booth. All right, so that means that whatever we do has to be completely self-sustained. Space was not changing. It's the booth is the what the booth is. There's no more sizing. There's no more. We can't go and move this wall out a little bit because I need more space. It's just what it was. So we knew that we had this pretty large area. I mean, it was probably 15 foot tall by 15 foot wide. So by 15 foot. So like it was just a big cube. It's cool. So I've got this big cube and I've got this really big system, but it's not like there was a wall missing on this. So we had to fit everything through a 6x8 door. So that right there meant that this thing had to be broken up into all sorts of pieces because that was the only way that it was actually even going to be able to fit inside of the X-ray booth in order for us to even put it together. All right, so now we have the physical constraints kind of framed up in our minds. So, all right, well, what is it that we're trying to inspect? What does this gantry need to be able to reach to? And that's where kind of the wheels fell off of the other company's design, because this gantry had to be able to span the entire back wall. So it had about 15 feet of movement on the back wall. It also needed to be able to come out towards the front wall about 10 feet. So that right there, that's a huge, huge cantilevered load. So you can't just go and slap some linear actuators up there and have it be able to handle that much of a cantilevered load. So, all right, so now we've got this huge cantilevered load. Well, wait a second. We've only talked about the forward and backwards and the side to side. What about the up and down? Well, that up and down was at the end of that cantilevered load. So that was another pretty large linear actuator. So now all of a sudden, not only do I have this massive structure that I have to build to even hold this cantilevered load and everything. I mean, the gantry itself is huge. It weighed 1,500 pounds. I mean, this thing was a monster. So, all right, now now we've got an idea of what this gantry looks like. So now let's start looking at the components. So we started looking at the motors that the previous uh, vendor had started telling the customer, and it's like, well, wait a second, guys, these motors can't move a gantry this large. Like we need a lot more power. But as soon as you start talking about needing a lot more power, then you start running back into constraints that we had with this is an X-ray booth. There's a small hole, and I believe the hole was like 8 by 8 in the side of the booth. It was a manufactured hole with all the shielding and everything around it, so that you could have these penetrations into the booth. The customer already had a bunch of stuff in there. Like this thing was probably 3/4 of the way full. So as soon as you start talking about adding a lot more power to something, you immediately start thinking, okay, well now my cables are getting bigger, and it just kind of starts to snowball at that point because all right, I need bigger motors, I need bigger cables. Well, now I got to put more stuff through this hole. But again, it's not just as simple as increasing the power, because remembering that we needed to have super high precision for this system to actually work correctly. So we weren't doing this with a stepper motor. We had to do this with a servo so that we could get that feedback and know exactly where the gantry was sitting at all times. So you're not just increasing your power, you're increasing all sorts of pieces to this that make it all work together to give you all the precision that you need, all the power that you need. And that's how we started to explore this idea of distributed servos, because that would eliminate a lot of our problems. We would be able to bring power and Ethernet into this booth. So we could minimize the amount of cabling that we were bringing into the booth, but still make it so that this machine wasn't going to be absolutely terrible for us to work on, because we were able to get all of our control pieces right next to basically where we needed them. And there we have it. We defined what actually needed to get done, how it needed to get done. We defined our spacing. We defined, from a very basic electrical standpoint, what needed to happen, what components we needed. So the next logical piece was let's present this to the customer and see how that falls. And uh, it worked very well with them. I don't know if it's just because, we actually presented them with a solution that showed that this project was actually going to move forward, or if they truly liked the solution, but they were happy. We were a go. It was time to start actually making this happen. So, from the manufacturing standpoint, I feel like this is a good opportunity for me to actually point out that we really didn't have a plan for how we were going to manufacture this thing either. I mean, this was a very large structure. So, we've worked out the solution, we've got everything moving, we've got the designs. It's so funny because this is one of those moments where you look at the CAD for something so long that you realize that things really do truly look smaller on CAD. If I'm looking at something on CAD for uh, 8 hours a day, and then I actually go see this thing physically being built, it kind of blows your mind a little bit, even though fundamentally that this thing is huge because you designed it. it's just so different to see it actually becoming a product in front of you. I remember when we first got everything together and it was all welded up, the frame was ready to go, and we went to do that first kind of fitment, making sure that the top and the bottom married up to each other perfectly. There wasn't anything that didn't really kind of click together there. And it didn't dawn on me at this point that in order to put the top of this the gantry steel on top of the bottom section, all we did was we grabbed the fork truck and we just hoisted it up there. We bolted it in, and everything was great. Like we were really happy. Like it looked really nice. The funny part, again, looking back at it now, is it never dawned on me that wait a second, we can't use a fork truck in the gantry. We're not actually going to be able to put this together like this in the field. But like I said, I wasn't even thinking about that at this point. It was just wow, this thing is actually coming together. I remember I took all of the pieces of the gantry out. I assembled them onto this frame. It all went together really nicely. I remember I got everything wired up, and you know that first movement was so smooth. Everything just it was coming together so well. I continue on. I get the everything moving. I take the videos for the customer, send it over to them. They're super excited because again, they've been working on this project for a long time, and they say, "Yep, yeah, absolutely. Like this is what we're looking for." So we tear it down, put everything back in the crates for the gantry, load the frame into the back of a trailer, take it out, get it powder coated, and then start to load up the trailer to take it to site. And I think it was at this point when I'm sitting there with the trailer and I've got the gantry frame on it. I've got all the crates that have the pieces of this gantry on it, that I looked at it. I'm like, man, this thing's really big. I mean, part of what I had to do was I had to take this whole thing apart because there was no way that if I left it all together that I was even going to be able to drive down the road. It was going to be high enough to where I was going to have height problems. So let's fast forward to day one on site. So I pull up to the gate. They let me in. I get back into the shipping and receiving area, and that's the first time that the customer tells us that they don't actually have a forklift that was capable of really unloading this gantry system very easily. So it's like, okay, we'll figure something out, and ultimately we ended up having to tear apart everything, and we kind of staged out all these different pieces out on in the middle of their driveway because we had to use the fork truck to get it to the top of their ramp because they had a floor level ramp, and this stuff was just way too heavy for us to push on up that ramp. But then we had to put it onto basically these little furniture moving stands and push it through their facility. Now, that part sounds like pretty standard. Where we were trying to get to, we actually had to go through kind of like their kitchenette break room area. So here we are pushing these huge pieces of steel and these XYZ gantry pieces just through their kitchenette while people are having lunch, and everybody's looking at us like, what are you guys doing? It's like, well, this is the way that we have to get over to this lab where these parts were going. So after a few more comedy gold pieces happen here, we get all the parts over to this lab that is where the X-ray booth was sitting at and everything. And I'll never forget it. My mechanical installer looks at me and he said, "All right, what now?" And at the time, I was like, "Well, now we gotta build this." And it took me a second to realize what he was actually saying, because we had the frame pieces here, and we're standing outside of the door for this booth, and that was kind of the first time that reality finally set in of, wait, we don't have a fork truck. We can't do this the way that we did this in the shop. So here we are. We've got all the pieces sitting here, and we pushed the base part of the gantry frame into the booth. So cool, it actually fit. CAD did me right. It worked in CAD and it worked in the field. And now we're staring at this top piece. Now, again, mind you, this top piece is 400 pounds. Like, this thing's not light. This is not something that you just go and grab a few guys and just throw it up there, because we also have to lift this thing up almost over our heads, because the base of the gantry frame is sitting at about it was like 5 or 6 feet. So I mean, this thing was not an easy piece to move up. So we have this very heavy piece that has to go up 5 or 6 feet. So we're staring at this, and it's like, all right, I don't know. I don't have a plan right now, because uh, we thought that we were going to be able to use different tools here to get it in. So, all right, I guess we're walking back to the trucks right now, and let's see what kind of hardware we have that we could possibly use here. So, after about 20 minutes of scrounging through our trucks, we found one chain fall. We had the 5,000 pound ratchet straps that we used to transport all the gantry stuff down in the trailer. And that was kind of it. That's what we had available to us. I kind of feel like this is the part of the story where I should just stop talking about how we did it and just give you guys the idea that we did it, because I'm sure if I explain to you how this all worked, there's going to be inevitably some people that are like, "Oh, you can't do that." So fast forward, and the stand is up. Everything is tied in. We've anchored the frame into the floor. The gantry is actually up on the wall. We've got the cantilever portion that's sticking out done. We've got the piece that goes up and down off of that cantilevered portion up. So mechanically, this thing is in place. So I remember stepping back here for a second and looking at it and just letting out a huge sigh of relief, because it fit. Everything fit where it was supposed to. I mean, it was tight, and it had to be tight, but I remember on each side we had about an inch of clearance. So from going off of their CAD drawings, we we got this thing kind of perfectly in place the way that it needed to. So there we have it. It's installed. All of the mechanical pieces are in place. So all right, we got some tension off of us. So now let's talk about one of my favorite little side stories from this project. Because like I said, there's so many things that I love about this project, and one of the really funny things is that, like I mentioned, this was a project for a defense contractor, and because the project wasn't mine to begin with, I actually didn't do any sort of security validation or get any sort of clearance to be at this facility, or really any of kind of this basic stuff that you would expect to need to be able to go inside of a facility that's kind of a controlled facility. I was on site for this install for a total of 4 days. So this story happened on the third day. So the first and second days with security were pretty eventful. Like we really didn't have to do much with them. They were kind of curious of like what we were there for and uh, why we didn't really seem to have much paperwork, but basically nobody really questioned it too much. But the third day, the third day, we had a totally different security guard, and we walked into the security booth and just planned on doing our normal sign in and all that fun stuff. And this guy looks at me and he looks at my ID. He types some stuff into his computer. He looks back at me again and he says, "What are you doing here? We don't have you in the system. Uh, you don't have any clearance. What exactly are you here to do?" And I remember just standing there, and he's looking at me. I'm looking at him. We both probably have these puzzled looks on our faces of like he's wondering who I am. I'm wondering like, wait, what? I've been here for 3 days at this point, and you're questioning all of this stuff now. So like there's this just awkward tension of like two people that are genuinely confused about the situation going on in front of them. So after what feels like 5 minutes at the time, in reality it was probably like 10, 15 seconds, the security guard looks at me and he says, you know what? I think I need you to just go sit down over there. I need to make some phone calls because I gotta understand what exactly we have going on here. And I said, okay, well, what I'll do is I'm gonna go make some phone calls with my contact and see if they can come up here and talk with you of what we've got going on and all of that fun stuff. So we're both on the phone with different people trying to resolve this situation. So eventually, my contact shows up at the security office. My contact's boss shows up at the security office, and I hear these guys talking with the security guard, and the security guard keeps telling them, like, "Guys, he doesn't have any paperwork. How am I supposed to let him in this facility?" And my contact and his boss are sitting there like, "Well, I mean, to be fair, he's already been here for 3 days, and we're kind of in the middle of an install, so." I guess we got to figure out something. So after this back and forth goes on for a while, they finally come and grab me and they're like, "Hey, so you really don't have any clearance to be here. So I understand that you've already been here for a few days, so you've kind of already probably seen everything that you're going to see, but basically what we have to do today is, you just have to work in the area that you're working in." And I looked at him and I'm like, "Well, isn't that what we've been doing?" And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get it. But today you need to just work in the area that we are working in. You can't go anywhere else in the facility. You can't basically go anywhere without anybody with you the entire time." And I remember I looked at my contact again, and he just says, "Just go with it." I was like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "Well, no, we need you to say like you're not going to go anywhere." I said, "Oh, okay. I will not go anywhere else in the facility today, and I will just work in the area that we're working in." And the security guard looks at me. He's like, "All right, good enough for me." And I get my pass for the day. But it was just so funny because it's just uh, on day number 3, we're having this big discussion, and it it ended up being like a pretty big stop of work. I mean, I think I ended up spending a half hour in the security office that day trying to get this whole thing resolved. So, we get everything resolved on site and all is good. There actually ended up being kind of a part 2 to this whole interaction with the security officer in the form of a couple of weeks later, I got this email from the head of the security for this facility, saying you're not allowed to be on this facility without having any clearance, and we need you to fill out all this paperwork and whatnot, and until you fill out all this paperwork, we can't have you here. I I sent an email over to my contact, and I was like, so what about if you guys need service and I don't have the paperwork done? And he responded back. He's like, well, we figured out how to get you in here once, so I'm sure we can figure out something again. So I know we kind of skipped over the electrical aspect, the programming aspect of the project, but quite frankly, that wasn't really that eventful. I mean, it was once we were mechanically installed and we got through all of the challenges and hurdles of actually getting that physical installed piece in place at the facility. It was a standard project. I mean, everything kind of ran well. We were able to show the customer everything that they needed to. We were able to get everything to operate the way that it needed to. So I feel like adding all the information about what the programming side looked like and all that fun stuff. Just it really doesn't add to the story, just because we I made the XYZ gantry move in XYZ coordinates, and they were able to use a hand controller to manually move it, and it was pretty standard at that point. So yeah, that was my XYZ gantry for a defense contractor customer, and as you can tell, I mean, it was a really fun project for me, and it wasn't just because the project itself was fun. It's just that there were so many aspects to the project that made this kind of one of those stories that I'll gladly remember for the rest of my career, because it's just there was uh, almost a comedy of errors that led to ultimately a very successful project. This is From the Bucket, where controls design meets reality. Until next time.